and a senior research associate with our team. Ms. Segerman has 30 years of experience in urban and regional planning with expertise in transportation and mobility planning, growth management, access management, corridor preservation, and public involvement. Karen holds a master's degree in urban planning from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners, the Institute of Transportation Engineers, APA, and the Congress for New Urbanism, and was a recipient of the FSITE 2009 Transportation Professional of the Year Award, as well as the 2004 Florida APA Award of Excellence for her work in multimodal transportation policy. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it to Karen to present today's webinar on what to expect when you're expecting a bypass. Karen?
Thank you, Christine. And thank you all for joining us for today's presentation on bypasses. This is the Bypass Impacts Part 2, Assessing Land Use and Transportation Impacts of a Bypass Alternative in Small and Medium-Sized Communities, and it's geared more to a technical audience. This technology transfer is sponsored by the Florida Department of Transportation. The DOT project manager is Gary Socolow in the System Planning Office. And the CUTR research team included Christine Williams, myself, with assistance from our former graduate student Danny Shupp. This presentation is based on research performed for the Florida Department of Transportation in 2011. The objective of the project was to gain insights on how Florida was looking at the indirect impacts of bypass construction on land use, livability, and community character. In part one of this two-part series, planners, decision makers, concerned citizens, and others are equipped with basic knowledge regarding the impacts of proposed bypasses. Part two addresses the more technical aspects of what to look for in reviewing potential bypass impacts. Attention to land use, network connectivity, and livability result in a multidimensional approach to bypass planning and impact mitigation. A bypass is a road. A bypass is a road passing around a town or its center to provide an alternative route for traffic that is just passing through on the way to another destination without any intention of stopping. The bypass road connects to the original road at either end of the area bypassed. For purposes of the study, small and medium-sized communities were characterized as those populations between 1,000 to 50,000 people. Research showed that bypasses may affect the rate of growth, development patterns, type and location of economic activity, community character, livability, and local mobility. This presentation is based on research performed for DOT. Our objective was to gain insights on how Florida was looking at the indirect impacts of bypass construction on land use, livability, and community character. Consideration of a bypass alternative is increasing in small and medium-sized communities for roadways that are part of Florida's strategic intermodal system known as the SIS. The SIS is made up of highways, rail, ports, and airports of statewide and regional importance and guides strategic investments linked to Florida's economy. Most highways that pass through small communities and rural areas are part of this system, as you can see from the map on the screen. Major state highways are often the main street in small and medium-sized communities and serve regional through traffic as well as local travel. When the roadway is a main street, freight and other fast-moving vehicles using the highway become into conflict with slower-moving local traffic, including bicycles and pedestrians. A bypass is considered for a number of reasons. One may be to relieve traffic congestion. Another may be to minimize heavy truck traffic and the noise, fumes, and vibrations that come with them. Another reason may be to reduce emergency response time. Emergency services, such as fire and police stations, are located in the downtown of many smaller communities. When the main roadway is congested, it is difficult for emergency vehicles to get to incidents quickly. Finally, a major reason for a bypass is to improve travel time on the roadway, especially on Florida's strategic intermodal system. When determining which roadways should be part of the SIS, FDOT does consider community livability. Guidelines discourage roadways with heavy truck travel through residential and commercial areas that may have high levels of pedestrian activity. Therefore, the nature of traffic on a state highway calls for consideration of a bypass where a SIS highway is the main street of a community. Let's look at an example. US 301 is a north-south SIS highway that extends through Florida from I-75 in the town of Ellenton down in Manatee County to north to the St. Mary's River at the Florida-Georgia line in Nassau County. In DOT District 2, US 301 covers 103 miles. Two bypasses are under consideration along this stretch, one in Baldwin and one in Stark. This is an important freight transportation link and also serves as an essential commuter route. The bypass, or alternate truck route through Stark, is scheduled for construction in 2016 at an estimate of $90 million. The 7.3-mile limited access 4-lane alternate truck route on the west side of Stark will be built between County Road 227 and County Road 233. You can see that. Let's see. Here we go. Whoops. Having trouble with my arrow here. From down here at this point all the way up to here. Several alternatives were analyzed. The no-build alternative would result in continued congestion and delay, and the transportation system management alternatives would optimize the capacity of the existing facility, yet not relieve all of the congestion. The rural alternative, which is the selected alternative, will be a limited access roadway constructed with 2 travel lanes in each direction, paved shoulders, grass medians, and ditches. Grade-separated interchanges will be constructed to provide access at State Road 100, which is here, and State Road 16, which is here. Overpasses will be constructed over County Road 229, the CSX Railroad, 229 is here, and the CSX Railroad and County Road 100A are down in this area. The purpose of this alternate truck route is to relieve congestion on the US 301 corridor within Stark and provide the needed capacity for future traffic growth. The bypass is projected to carry 25,300 vehicles a day in 2020, with an increase to 31,400 a day in 2040. The bypass provides an alternate route for trucks carrying freight without having to stop at all of the traffic signals in downtown Stark or be delayed by the railroad crossing or the school zone. Our research included some observations of DOT processes and procedures. Transportation project alternatives on the SIS currently focus mainly on mobility, level of service, and design criteria. This focus sometimes defines the need for capacity projects much larger in scale than can reasonably be accommodated within a small or medium-sized community, such as an 8-lane roadway through a downtown. Ultimately, a bypass alternative is chosen to avoid impact on the community itself. A lot of the information available for public review focuses on direct project impacts within defined project boundaries near the proposed bypass. Change in growth patterns or loss of businesses downtown are impacts that receive less attention. To assess indirect land use impacts, analysts rely on future land use as identified in local government comprehensive plans and local government development review requirements and processes. What may be missing from this review is a critical analysis of the potential of the proposed bypass to impact land use and development patterns. If a bypass alternative is chosen, the bypass route may receive little or no corrective treatment to return community character and aesthetics to the bypassed roadway. The bypass may result in less truck traffic, both truck traffic as well as automobile traffic through the community, and provide an opportunity for attention to sidewalks, bike paths, streetscaping, and landscaping. Technical assistance may be provided to the community on methods for addressing potential negative land use impacts. FDOT examines potential direct and indirect impacts of a bypass through the socio-cultural effects evaluation, which is performed during the efficient transportation decision-making, or ETDM process, and during PD&E studies. During the planning screen of the ETDM process, a project is being considered for inclusion in a long-range transportation plan, such as the Strategic Intermodal System Plan, or an applicable Metropolitan Planning Organization's Long-Range Transportation Plan. A Sociocultural Effects, or SCE evaluation, is an integral part of the ETDM process, and DOT must follow specific procedures in conducting the evaluation. In general, issues considered as part of the sociocultural effects evaluation are categorized as social, economic, land use, mobility, aesthetics, and relocation potential. Comments received during the evaluation are used to ensure that community issues are identified and addressed, to avoid, minimize, and/or mitigate adverse effects, and identify conceptual design solutions or enhancements. The Department has an SCE evaluation process website that contains numerous resources to guide analysts. The ETDM website contains a detailed overview of the process as well as guidance regarding the environmental screening tool, which is an internet-accessible interactive database and mapping application. Local governments, interested citizens, and other stakeholders can and should participate throughout the ETDM process to ensure project impacts are addressed. Based on research observations of existing practice, several recommendations were made. The first is simply sharing more information to help the community understand the potential impacts of a bypass roadway on land use, livability, community character, and local mobility. Information regarding possible impacts of a bypass should be conveyed to the community in a user-friendly format such as a pamphlet or presentation containing basic information regarding bypass impacts throughout all phases of the project. Both a brochure and a white paper have been developed for this purpose and are available on the FDOT Systems Planning website as well as the CUTR website. In addition, a recorded webcast of Part 1 of bypasses as well as this one, Part 2, will be available at the website noted. Another recommendation is to address preconceptions. That community may have preconceptions about bypasses. Many of these are in regard to the effect of a bypass on the community's economy. For example, a common concern is the potential for the bypass to have a negative effect on downtown businesses, including a decline in sales and decreased business activity in the town along the bypassed route. Downtown businesses with strong local customer base will likely stay put, particularly if the community takes steps to maintain the downtown as a place that people want to be. Analysts may examine the potential change in business trips looking at through trips and freight volumes using techniques such as license plate surveys, on-site interviews, and on-site observation. Details on how to assess the potential change in business customers is available in the research report. Recommendations also included reconsideration of the study area size. Transportation project study areas are commonly defined in relation to a distance from the proposed project. Guidance recommends gathering existing and future land use data from a buffer width of 500 feet from the project's proposed alignment. Shown here is State Road 26 through Newberry, Florida. State Road 26 is an east-west route across north-central Florida. The highway's western terminus is at its intersection with US 19, 98, and 27 in Fanning Springs near the Gilchrist-Levy County line. It travels through Gilchrist County and Alachua County and beyond. It travels through Newberry west of Gainesville, where it is University Avenue. The route under consideration is highlighted for approximately 500 feet on either side of the roadway. While this may be an adequate study area in an urban environment such as this, it may not be as effective in a rural area. Returning to our example of a planned bypass or alternate truck route on START, notice that the preferred alternative completely skirts the community. So to orient you, here's the roadway, the main roadway that goes through Stark here, and the alternative, the bypass or alternate truck route is now proposed to go up around this direction. The blue line illustrates a 500-foot buffer area on either side of the proposed bypass as the study area. However, the vacant land between the community and the proposed bypass holds the potential for growth, particularly along the arterials that will connect them. So we look at this roadway such as this one and this one as arterials that connect the bypass down into the community. This yellow area illustrates a distance of 1 mile from the roadway where indirect land use impacts are likely to occur. And you can see that this covers a lot of vacant, undeveloped land that's in between the community and the bypass, as well as vacant land beyond the bypass. New SCE evaluation guidance suggests consideration of a 1 mile buffer in rural areas due to coarser land use pattern and distribution of individual communities. In reviewing a proposed bypass for consistency with local government comprehensive plan, consider both direct and indirect impacts in relation to future land use and the future transportation network. Has the comp plan included a bypass and potential land use changes? Did any amendment to include the bypass address potential land use changes? Note objectives and policies that may be pertinent to the consistency review include ones that are listed here, such as a regional policy plan aimed at improving hurricane evacuation routes, a local comp plan policy to discourage sprawl, or a Main Street plan objective to provide street parking, street furniture, and pedestrian signals to improve the walkability of a downtown shopping area. Any consistency determination should be reviewed with planning agency staff and study area stakeholders to ensure plan objectives and policies are correctly interpreted. The benefit of this exercise is that potentially controversial items which may arise at various points in the process will be documented and can be addressed. So back to our example in Stark. Notice the undeveloped areas between the central city and the proposed bypass. Notice where the bypass joins the old road. What type of development may be expected in these areas? So we're looking at where the bypass might be joining 301 there and over here in this area. Likely land use changes resulting from construction of a limited access bypass include intensive development near interchanges, strip commercial and industrial uses on roadways between the developed area, and interchanges with the bypass. Low-density residential development on nearby land made more accessible by the bypass is also subject to change. An analyst may be inclined to rely on the local government comprehensive plan to assess future land use. However, such plans do not often reflect land use changes that may be expected as a result of new roadway access. When conditions are generally favorable for growth in the region, a bypass can dramatically influence the rate and location of development. Favorable conditions, include available utilities, relatively low land prices, and natural amenities. If the future land use plan does not anticipate new growth in areas that may be accessed by the proposed bypass, it is important to consider the growth inducement potential. And how can we do that? A growth inducement analysis can establish whether project alternatives are likely to induce growth or alter the planned development pattern. Table 3 in the research report is a checklist of questions closely related to factors considered by real estate investors or consumers when making a development or purchase decision. The checklist was adapted from an NCHRP report 403 entitled Guidance for Estimating the Indirect Effects of Proposed Transportation Projects. Completion of the checklist will help the analyst to assess the potential for the project to induce growth in the study area. Many of the questions can be answered by consulting resources gathered for the sociocultural evaluation. Other information, including known future development trends, may require contact with local planners, officials, and real estate professionals familiar with the area. The key to making a responsible determination of growth inducement is to involve study area stakeholders in the process. If growth may be induced by a bypass alternative, the analyst should then determine if the potential for induced growth is consistent with local government planning policies and objectives, as well as future land use maps within the extended study area. More complex means of analysis are found in NCHRP Project 2525, Forecasting Indirect Land Use Effects of Transportation Projects. To forecast indirect land use effects of a proposed bypass requires both planning judgment and collaborative judgment as appropriate analysis methods. Planning judgment can be described as a structured process for analyzing and forecasting land use change that relies on an understanding of the basics of transportation land use interactions, basic data sources, asking the right questions, and using rules of thumb from research to make informed judgments. Collaborative judgment can extend the solo planner's understanding through soliciting advice from others who are knowledgeable about the study area. When no other resources are available, collaborative judgment may be the only sufficient approach for indirect land use effects. In such cases, it is important to structure this input so that the weight of given individuals, personalities, and agendas are evened out. Key variables include those you see on your screen: change in accessibility, change in property value, forecasted growth, relationship between land supply and demand, availability of other services such as water and sewer, other market factors including growth trends, and public policy or the ability or inability to change land use. Although it may be argued that local governments prepare comprehensive plans that include future land use and possibly included a bypass route, it is likely that some communities lack knowledge and resources to fully analyze how a new transportation facility could reallocate growth in the area. This is Table 4 from the research document that illustrates variables, data sources, value, and potential for land use changes. So you can see that here a change in accessibility. Data sources include travel demand models. If the value is less than a couple of minutes of time savings for an average trip or no change in volume over capacity, then the potential for land use change would probably be none to very weak. And you can see that if you look at the change in property value measured in dollars here, through expert opinion, if there's more than a 50% increase, the potential for land use change is probably very strong. So you can take the data that you've collected and look through this complex analysis, excuse me, and figure out if there is potential for land use change to occur. Analysts should also address how likely is it that a transportation project will be followed by some noticeable change in the land use that would not have occurred in the absence of the project or sooner than anticipated. If such changes did occur, would they be consistent with the comprehensive plan? A benefit cost analysis is a mechanism for weighing the benefits of a transportation project against its cost, considering common factors such as travel time, safety, and vehicle cost. This analysis, performed as part of the environmental impact assessment during the project development and environmental or PD&E phase, often fails to address factors that affect livability and community character. A benefit cost analysis of a transportation project could be more comprehensive by including factors of community concern such as land use, accessibility, noise, emissions, and barrier effects. Our example from Stark, in our example from Stark here, we noticed the lack of roadway development, roadway network developed through the area. So again, take our thing in our arrow in, we can see that there are a lot of areas in here and between some of these other arterial roads where there is really no roadway network developed. As new development occurs, great potential exists for local trips on the bypass between interchanges if connectivity of the local transportation network is not improved. In addition, access management should be implemented on major arterials connecting the community to the bypass, as you can see highlighted in red there. Impacts of a proposed bypass on the overall transportation system should be analyzed. Does the local government comp plan address the desired street, bicycle, and pedestrian networks? The community should identify gaps in the networks where the existing local street system does not provide land access or adequate circulation throughout the community off of the main roadway. This figure illustrates what a street network might look like, including the recommended distance between roadway types. Note that the service road concept is shown parallel to the major arterial. Such a road provides additional access to land uses facing the arterial, which reduces the need to access all uses from the major roadway. The result is greater ease of vehicular movement on the arterial. This treatment may be appropriate for major arterials connecting the community to the bypass. The overall grid structure allows several different routes from one point to another, which lowers the traffic volume on any single roadway and provides alternatives when a road is blocked by an accident or other event. In addition, one-way streets should be avoided in favor of two-way streets that support circulation and activity. Negative impacts of a bypass on land use and growth patterns can be avoided or minimized by the use of strict access controls on the bypass. The most effective means to prevent sprawl development along a bypass is by designing interchanges only where the new roadway exits and enters the bypass roadway. Design and construction of the bypass in this manner will not interfere with the existing travel patterns or attract development to outlying areas. However, it may be necessary to provide access over the bypass. This option, of course, is likely to be politically unpopular because the development community may perceive the bypass as an opportunity to access less expensive land. In this way, the bypass is considered good for economic growth. Limited access control, a less restricted approach, provides for interchanges at crossroads with major arterials and connection to the bypassed roadway. Development pressure will inevitably occur near the interchanges and is likely in areas between the community and the bypass. Purchasing limited access right-of-way for a distance of 600 feet to a quarter mile from the interchange ramps may help to minimize congestion and safety problems near interchange ramps. Land use and transportation network planning is important for these areas. Finally, if property owner access to the bypass is considered, The bypass should be designed in close coordination with local government mobility plans or corridor management plans to minimize and control access locations. When the comprehensive plan does not adequately address land use and the transportation system in support of the bypass, it may be appropriate to develop and implement a local mobility plan. A mobility plan may be defined as specific strategies to direct land use and/or transportation system designed to improve or maintain mobility. The focus is on moving people and goods rather than vehicles. Less emphasis is placed on relieving auto congestion, and more emphasis is placed on expanding and reinforcing mode choice, looking at not just sidewalks and bicyclists, but transit and freight movement as well. A local jurisdiction should take the lead in preparing a mobility plan for the area because it has the authority to implement the plan. The department may lend technical assistance and resources to the effort. A mobility plan should address land use between the community and the bypass and 1 mile beyond, both land use and access around interchanges, both land use and access where the bypass meets the existing roadway, corridor access management along the connecting roadways, land use and corridor management along the bypassed roadway, and multimodal network improvements designed to connect outlying transportation facilities and enhance local mobility. Development and implementation of a mobility plan can enhance the benefits of a new bypass, as well as minimize or mitigate potentially negative impacts. Similarly, a mobility plan can help to mitigate potential impacts to the existing roadway, even if a bypass alternative is not chosen. In some cases, travel demand on highways that traverse small and medium-sized communities could be somewhat alleviated by improvements on parallel facilities that are not part of the state highway system. The roadway to be bypassed should be evaluated for possible projects that discourage its use for high-speed, high-volume traffic movement and increase focus on local mobility and community character. Projects may include a road diet and the addition of pedestrian, bicycle, and transit facilities and amenities. Key factors in mobility planning for this area include development plan or Main Street program, including incentives for infill development, community character, including the addition of street trees, street furniture, and gathering places, as well as controlling traffic speed and minimizing pedestrian crossing distances, pedestrian, bicycle, and transit facilities and amenities, signage and advertising on the bypass directing travelers to the downtown or bypassed area, and infrastructure maintenance. The research report also recommends that Florida consider a statewide bypass policy. Some states, including California, Texas, and Vermont, have policies directly related to consideration and construction of bypasses that are embedded in the state statute. Such policies address things like authorization, community consent, and signage for the bypassed area. A recommended bypass policy for Florida could clarify the conditions under which a bypass may be considered, as well as provide guidance for appropriate analysis to be performed. I think that's the same slide again. And then finally, while a bypass may seem like the best way to resolve issues of congestion through a small and medium-sized communities, there are direct and indirect impacts to land use and the transportation system that should be thoroughly understood by stakeholders before that decision is made. Indirect impacts include opening up areas to new development, redistribution of economic activity, and changes to land use, livability, community character, and local mobility. It is important to identify these impacts and to develop strategies for impact mitigation and the long-term viability of the community. It's also important to address the growth inducement potential of a new facility and to provide technical assistance to communities for development of a mobility plan to mitigate those negative impacts. And that ends this presentation of part 2 bypass impacts part 2, assessing the land use and transportation impacts of a bypass alternative on small and medium-sized communities. So at this time, I think we would accept any questions that you may have.
Yes. Hi, Karen. It's Stephanie. Yeah, thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. And we'll hand it over to Christine in a second to read you any of the questions that have come in. If those of you that are joining today's webinar haven't already done so, please make sure you provide us with your name, organization, and email address. And that will, again, we won't be sharing that information. And to use the Q&A manager to ask a question to Karen, simply type your question and/or comment in the box, and then hit the little Ask button, and that will be submitted, and then Christine will be able to read it to Karen. Okay, Christine, you can go ahead and take it away. It looks like we already have a couple questions in the queue.
Yes, thanks, Stephanie, and thank you, Karen, for the excellent presentation. And we do have a few questions here. So one question is, when would be...
Christine, we can't hear. Christine, we can't really hear you.
My apologies for that. I think we're all set now. Thank you, Stephanie, and thanks, Karen, for an excellent presentation. We do have a question here that has come in. When would be the best time for local government to get involved with the Florida Department of Transportation in regard to a bypass?
Well, the answer to that is as early as possible. As soon as there is any conversation in regard to the possibility of a bypass consideration, it's a great time for the local government to get involved and start the conversation with the Department of Transportation about what that might really mean for their community.
Okay, and another kind of related question we're seeing here is, why would a local government embark on such a major planning effort when a bypass is proposed?
Well, if we look at bypass, or just another roadway built around a community, it has the potential to make such a big change to the community. And the community was going along, growing along the major state road that was going through it before, and putting a bypass around that, and especially when a lot of access is allowed, opens up land for new development, and of course the desire for people to build new homes or businesses out in those areas. And you can definitely help, that community can prevent sprawl and prevent some of the problems that occur with new growth in terms of crowded access on an arterial and lack of network, by going ahead and taking a hard look at where that bypass might go, what land uses might be attracted by it, and how they can expand their own community network, roadway network, to support local mobility that is off of major roadways.
Okay, thanks. Another question that has come in is, what is the lifespan of a bypass before it becomes a congested arterial? Capitol Circle in Tallahassee was a bypass, but today is a congested arterial. Do you have any observations on that?
Well, our study didn't exactly look at that question, but by addressing land use and access management and the rest of the roadway network certainly does help determine how long a bypass will actually function as a bypass. Allowing access directly to a new bypass instead of just at interchanges definitely leads toward creating congestion, because as we know, access in and out of driveways increases congestion. The number of traffic signals increases congestion or affects the speed and delay. So, and of course, the land uses that are approved along the roadway without commensurate increase in local network has an effect on that.
Okay, thank you. Question relates to how do you quantify, please quantify what is meant by weak, very weak, moderate, strong, and very strong in relation to development potential? Was there information on that issue?
That is, I don't recall exactly what those measures were offhand, and that is available in the research report.
Okay, thank you. Another question, how do you handle the public perception that the bypass will contribute to the failure of a downtown? What sort of information do you present to them so they understand?
Well, that's a really good question. When we performed this research, we were really trying to figure that out. And one thing that came to light is when economic analyses are done in relation to a bypass, it's very difficult to analyze on a downtown basis. Most of the economic numbers are available only on like a countywide basis. So while the economy may not change on a countywide basis, certainly there can be shifts in local businesses and smaller local businesses. And so you want to definitely look at things that we presented, such as license plate surveys and on-site interviews and those types of things, to find out where people are coming from to downtown businesses. Are they people who are driving through on the through route, and might they use the bypass instead and thereby not go through downtown anymore? And it's also important, it's very important for the downtowns to focus on a development plan or Main Street plan or whatever they'd like to call it to determine what they want their downtown to be once the major through traffic is pulled off of it. Those towns that developed plans and had a specific idea of what they wanted to be, whether it was an antique shopping district or whether it was an office business district or financial district, whatever they decided they wanted their downtown to be, and they worked toward it and provided incentives, were the successful downtowns. Those that didn't create any type of plans, often there was an increase in vacancy and kind of a loss as to what the downtown was going to be.
Great, thanks. And I do want to add to those that are listening in on the webinar that these materials are also accompanied by brochure and presentation for the public that is available to you to use in your work. And that's part of this technology transfer project. Another question that has come in, was there an alternative corridor analysis performed for the study that you presented today? And I assume that would be
I think you're meaning some of the studies that I referred to in the presentation. I referred to a couple of examples, and there definitely were corridor analysis studies performed. In the case of Newberry, Newberry has decided not to go with a bypass, but they're now looking at transportation system management alternatives along State Road 26 through Newberry. And in terms of Stark, yes, they did a corridor analysis. They had, I think, 3 different corridors they were looking at as well.
Another question, are there any downtown bypass success stories, either within Florida or elsewhere, that a planner could refer to while conducting a study?
I think, let's see, that's a harder one because none's jumping to mind. One town is Lakeland, Florida, where they did a bypass that didn't necessarily go outside of the community but went around the downtown, so that they kind of called it an in-town bypass. And they definitely have a strong plan for what they wanted their downtown to look at and look like, and it certainly has developed into a thriving little downtown with a number of different businesses and a number of different organizations that are determined to keep the downtown a destination for people to go.
Thank you. And also, I know in the report there were a number of comments or a synthesis done of preconceptions and findings about bypass effects. And I think that you'll find that very helpful as many of these issues are addressed in terms of the relationship between the bypass preconceptions and what actually happened. And many of them are positive, so it's not all adverse impacts.
Stephanie, could we back up the slides to show the website that they can find additional information on? It's kind of the last slide that I had there.
Okay.
There you go. Yeah. There's that's the CUTR website there, and also if you look at FDOT Systems Planning, if you look at their website, they also have these materials available on it. So FDOT Systems Planning, as well as the CUTR document slide website. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, I believe that's all the questions that we've received today, so I will turn the program back to Stephanie.
Great. Thank you so much, Karen and Christine, for the wonderful presentation today. If you could take a few minutes, it looks like if you just give me one quick second, the link for the evaluation may be broken, so let me go ahead and pull that up for you. If you could take a few seconds to fill out the, let's see, the link for the CUTR webcast, that would be extremely helpful to the presenter today, and as well give us some feedback if you would like to apply for AICP credit for this, continuing maintenance credit for this webinar. Please make sure you provide us with your contact information. Again, thank you so much to Karen and Christine for a wonderful CUTR webcast. Please join us on Thursday for a presentation by Dr. Gerard Wellman, who will be presenting on citizens or customers transit agency approaches to community involvement. Thank you everybody for attending today's CUTR webcast, and we will see you on Thursday for our next webinar.